You ever heard of retirement?
That's not much of an option in this line of work. The only retirement we get is death.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name's Mark and I have a project called Dawnwalker in London.
And Mark, how would you describe the music of Dawnwalker?
That's the $64,000 question that I never know how to answer, but broadly speaking, it kind of covers prog, experimental rock, some post-metal, and there's a lot of influences, so it's a lot of things under one hat.
And would you say you cross over into various styles of heavy metal, like doom metal, black metal, maybe some more drone or ambient styles?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, black metal has been a big influence on me, especially when I was younger. And we go into a Dawnwalker project with no real not too many preconceptions about what genre we wanted to fit into, but all of those things have been an influence at one time or another. So we just kind of tend to go wherever it goes. If it's doom or if it's black or if it's not, we just kind of do what works.
And you referred to Dawnwalker as a project. I'm assuming you are the main songwriter.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
And I've seen that Dawnwalker is also referred to as a collective. In terms of the collaborators that you have, is there a pool of talent that you like to go to that you collaborate with frequently, or does it change from album to album depending on what sound you want or what you want to accomplish with any particular release?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It sort of depends what is kind of appropriate for whatever we're doing at the time, and also just who is available that can help us do that. There is a core of us that has existed for a little while now, which is mainly myself, guitarist Matteo, and bassist and vocalist Dane Cross. We're kind of the core of the band, and then we have some regular collaborators, but each of us plays in 2 or 3 bands. We live in different corners of the country, so it's a revolving door. I think it was Robert Fripp from King Crimson who described his band as a way of getting things done, and that's kind of how I think of it.
And in describing your sound, I think it's worth noting that among your collaborators, you frequently have people who play violin, play the piano, other instruments that aren't typically associated with metal.
Yep, absolutely. There kind of has to be some sort of extra element for me that exists just outside of the core of a rock band, and sometimes that's just synths and sort of sound effects and atmospherics, I would call it, but we like to branch out, introduce other instruments, and just kind of create a sound palette for each project which suits what we're trying to achieve.
Now, why is that important to you? Why is it that you like to draw from these palettes outside of the standard rock or metal template?
Good question. That's just what appeals to me. That's something I've always loved growing up. I've never been like into the sort of meat and potatoes rock and roll band sort of, no shade on anybody, but like, AC/DC and stuff like that. It's always needed this extra element, this sort of gothic kind of narrative storytelling element, and the sort of drama that adding those extra layers provides, I think.
Do you feel that there are sonically things that you can't accomplish within a typical rock framework, like with just guitars or bass or drums?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify it though. It's just, I know for myself, when I'm coming up with ideas and I'm demoing and I'm writing new songs, if it's just guitars, bass and drums, it always feels like something's missing to me. There's like this kind of extra layer of magic that it's missing if you're just limiting yourself to typical rock instruments. So it's a way to kind of elevate it in a way and give it this sort of extra dimension, which I just think of as adding magic.
Can you tell me a little bit about what led you to form this project?
Yeah, I guess it started about a decade ago, and at the time it was very much a solo project. I was sort of making bedroom demos and sort of exploring ideas that I wasn't getting to do in the bands I was in at the time, things that were more difficult to achieve in a practice room, with a rock sort of lineup. Things that are either more complicated or more droney or more atmospheric that just kind of lent themselves to home studio experimentation, I would say. So it started out that way. Over time, it's developed into more of a band, and I guess we've just gotten better at exploring those things in a band setting. It doesn't have to be like on a computer or a demo tape.
And we can speak about your songwriting process more when we talk about this latest album, but writing songs by yourself and writing with collaborators or working with collaborators is two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
Once you started branching out and including more and more people into this project, the collective, so to speak, did you find your songwriting process changing?
Only in the sense that I probably would have an idea of the type of ensemble that I would want to put together to record this kind of music, so I would try and write to the strengths of that. And for that kind of instrumentation, I tend to have an idea pretty early on of what I want it to sound like, and then I write to that brief, if that makes sense. So yes, it does change it, but it also, I kind of write the core of the material, and then I have to take it to musicians who understand their own instruments. I can't possibly write good drum or violin parts myself because I'm not a drummer or a violin player. So there is this kind of interpretation that has to happen. I just kind of get the ball rolling, and then it's a case of taking it to collaborators and fleshing it out.
Now, what form are the songs when you take them to the collaborators? Do you have the arrangements sorted out? Are they largely guitar demos?
They are usually sort of band home demos, programmed drums, or just guitars that I've recorded at home. It kind of really depends on the project. This last album started out as very much just clean, quiet guitar demos that I'd done at home, and I was sort of a mind that I wanted to make a much quieter album with a lot more clean guitar and a lot more space for other instruments. That kind of ended up not becoming true in the end, but that's certainly how it started.
How clear of an idea of what you wanted Dawnwalker to sound like did you have when you first started the project?
Well, I had a very good idea of what I wanted the first album to sound like, but I never really thought about it beyond that. It's kind of, I can kind of demo and I can come up with ideas and like fill my phone with voice notes of little ideas and stuff, but it never really kind of takes on a life of its own until I get an idea for a bigger concept or a narrative or an album or like a bigger sort of space or an idea to put those ideas into.
How would you say the band has changed since that first album, just in terms of the style of the band?
Well, to begin with, I would say it was a lot more sort of prog and alt rock influence. There wasn't a whole lot of metal to begin with. It wasn't very riffy. It was a lot more about atmospherics and post rock and layering, and over time sort of doom and drone and black metal influences creeped in. And our last album, Ages, was definitely our heaviest thing that we've done. That was definitely our riffiest, but now we seem to be on the backward swing of moving away from the metal influences and trying to find something new. I don't know, I guess it's whatever is appropriate for what we're trying to do at the time.
Was there a reason you started incorporating more black metal and metal type influences?
Not consciously. I guess that was just what we were feeling at the time. Probably the music I was listening to had filtered in over the time. Black metal for me is something I very much associate with like my late teen years of getting into like the second wave stuff and Emperor and all that. So I don't know. I think sometimes ideas take time to filter through, and it was just a slow burn process of those influences making it into the music.
let's talk about this latest album. It's called House of Sand, and it will be released on August 19th of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this is your 5th album. Is that correct?
Yes, technically.
Tell me about the writing process of this album. Tell me about your intentions heading into this.
Well, I was coming off the back of Ages, and that was definitely our most successful thing. And over time, we've been getting better at putting ourselves out there and promoting our own albums and things. So Ages was actually quite an involved process, and I'd kind of had my head in the promo world and the sort of trying to get that album out to people and talking about that album a lot. And then when that was done, for the first time I already found myself with no sort of material in the bag that I'd already started working on. So I was starting from scratch this time, and you know, it was a weird time in the pandemic. I was having a lot of work cancelled and had a lot of time just sat at home. So they came from a very quiet place, and they came sort of slowly. They kind of coalesced over time.
We spoke a little bit about how you don't consciously have a plan for these albums, and they develop as they developed within your writing process and your collaboration process. Mm-hmm. Did you get a sense that this album was going in a more, or when did you get a sense that this album was going in a more ambient and atmospheric direction?
I think it was just sort of, it was already baked into the ideas, even from the beginning. The things that I was writing that I really liked all had this same sort of sadness to them. They came from this like sad, quiet, ghostly sort of place. And so things that didn't fit in with that were probably left by the wayside, and just started to coalesce this sort of body of material that all lived in the same world. I knew that would be the kind of overarching theme, this sort of ghostly quietness over everything, or at least that's how it got started, and that was what I was aiming for.
Now, throughout the album, there are some spoken word elements. Are those movie samples, or are those things that were written into the album?
There's both. The ones that are over music are written by myself and performed by Alistair Mitchell, who's a collaborator of ours. And those are like original pieces. They were actually some of the first things I wrote lyrically for the album. And then there are also some quotes between songs which are taken from old BBC documentaries. And yeah, there's a sort of a vibe of a TV set playing into an empty room. So the gaps between songs kind of had this creepy living room vibe, which comes from existing stuff.
Now, Alistair Mitchell is playing a character, is that correct?
Yeah, the master.
So is House of Sand, is it a narrative? Is this a story being told from beginning to end?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, all of our albums are kind of concept or narrative albums in some way or another. Typically they've been somewhat linear with a beginning, a middle, and an end, but this one is different. It's sort of fragmentary and non-linear. So there is definitely a story in there, but it's kind of, the album itself is a bit of a puzzle, and you're kind of just getting pieces of the puzzle, and it's just an extra layer for people to delve into. I love stuff like that. I'm super nerdy. I'll read all the liner notes, try and figure out what everything means, and those are the kind of records that I want to make too.
Do you want to speak a little bit about the narrative and who the master is?
The master is the master of the house. If you've seen the artwork, it's a family portrait. And I sort of imagine it as the family proudly taking their photo as they move into their new home, but there's a sort of air of uneasiness about it. So the concept of the album is the things that take place in that house. That's all I'll say.
And is Alistair somebody that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, he is. He actually used to be our drummer. And he is a little bit of a ham. He fancies himself as a voice artist and an aspiring actor. So we were trying to find somebody to play it, and it took me far too long to realize that he'd be absolutely perfect for it, and he had the perfect voice for it. So it was kind of kismet in the end. He smashed it, and I really love those performances. I think he did a great job.
Now, when you say he fancies himself a voice actor, does he work in the industry? Has he done other voice acting work?
No, not at all. And in fact, he's the kind of guy that rarely puts himself out there in that way. And I think he was surprised by how well he took to this. So this could be the beginning of a brand new career for him. We'll just have to wait and see.
Tell him to get in touch. I'm always looking for a voice actor.
Great. I'm sure he'd love that.
Tell me about the other collaborators that you have on this album. Specifically the ones contributing violin and piano.
So the violin player is called Robin Melinda Koob. She's a friend of ours. She has lived in the same sort of orbit of post-metal. She played in a band called Pine when we first met, and I saw her play with them as I was about to record Ages with Joe from the band Pine, who also recorded this album. And he recommended her for strings and vocals and stuff, and so it worked out. We became good friends, and now we're buddies and collaborators. She's probably the most musical person in the band. She's like classically trained and knows her theory far more than any of the rest of us do. So she's a constant help in putting these songs together.
And the piano player?
Oh yeah, she's called Mina Jackson. She worked in the studio where we recorded the piano. She actually stepped in for us at the last moment and did a fantastic job. Performing music isn't typically her main thing. She's a music therapist, I believe. So again, we were recording up in Manchester, which is not where we're from, and we were trying to use some local guys that we had mutual friends with, and I don't know, just worked out really well. She played beautifully on there.
We spoke a little bit about your writing process and how you like to hand off things to people who are more familiar with their instruments, more experienced with their instruments. Mm-hmm. How clear of an idea of what you wanted from the piano and violin parts? The
piano was closer to... I mean, I'm sort of a rubbish piano player, but I can sort of play to a... You did the synth parts on the earlier albums, right? Yeah, I did. Or they're programmed, or we just kind of muck in the studio. Generally speaking, yes. So I can play keys to a very basic standard, but I'm not a piano player by any means. But I wrote them to a respectable degree, I think, and then just handed them off to Mina, and she interpreted them and just made them real, really. Whereas violin, I have basically no idea how to write for, and I left those mostly just blank spaces where I knew what I wanted and handed them to Robin, and she mostly improvised them. We had a couple of days in the studio. We tried a few things out. We ran violin through pedals and got some cool like cello detuned kind of sounds that are in there. So yeah, the violin is 99% all Robin. Let's talk about the recording a little bit. You mentioned Joe Clayton, who engineered and mixed this album. Yep. People might know him from his band Leached. People who've listened to this podcast before may know his work as an engineer because he worked with Woad. Right, yep. Why Joe? It's a good question. Like, this is the second one we've done with him. The first time we worked together on Ages, we had been working with a lot of the same people in London, and we wanted to try something different, and we were trying to find somebody that we thought would kind of get all the different influences and the things we were trying to do. And Joe was a name that just kept coming up. We had friends, bands that had worked with him and spoke highly of him. His band Pine is it's kind of a post-rock band, but there's post-metal in there and there's prog parts. So when I heard their first album, I kind of thought, this guy will get it and he'll know what to do with us. And you had worked with him before, right? You had worked with him on a previous album? Yeah, this is our second one with him, yep. I'm curious about the recording approach that you guys took with this one.
Do you want to say anything at all about that?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, recording metal in particular can be a very sort of on the grid, sort of very typical way of working. Everything is close mic'd. Everybody's trying to make everything as heavy and as loud as possible. But that kind of production style doesn't really suit us. And that's kind of not what Joe is known for either. And we were really happy with the sound we got on the previous album. But this time we wanted to go just further into a more naturalistic sound, a lot more room ambience, setting up mics in rooms and leaving them. And we also just had an ethos of trying to do first takes, not overthinking things, trying to put stuff down and just be happy with it and move on, and kind of not get stuck in that sort of death cycle at the end of an album where you're overthinking and re-editing and doing too much and just ending up unhappy with everything. This time it was just kind of get it down right first time and then leave it be.
But this wasn't a live album, right? Like, you guys didn't record all in the room together?
No, not at all. It's definitely a multi-tracked album. We're not really the kind of band that could record live. We're rarely all in the same place at the same time, so we just aren't really that kind of band. But within the multi-track sort of paradigm, we try to have live performances. We recorded drums with no click tracks. They were just live in the room. And then we recorded to those tracks. We just tried not to manicure and edit and just make everything too perfect. We kind of live with imperfections, tried to do minimal takes, and just kind of let the recordings speak for themselves and not overwork them.
So this isn't a live album, but it does have the feel of classic prog or psychedelic rock albums, which were largely recorded live, I think, or maybe live with a few overdubs.
Mm-hmm.
In talking about the room sound, it does sound like this album has a lot of space to it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad you think so, because it was definitely something we were aiming for. You know, those prog bands could do it in the room because they were like working, touring bands that were playing, you know, do 2 or 3 tours a year, and then they record albums in between. They release an album every year. They were like well-oiled machines. Like, we're not that, really. We're a sort of collective that hardly exists in one space at one time, so it just can't really be that way. But wherever possible, we try to keep things as naturalistic as possible this time around.
Do you guys get to play live?
Yeah, we do, somewhat infrequently for the same reasons. We're actually just trying to sort out some dates for this new album so we can play some new songs. We haven't played any of the songs off this album live before, so it'll be all new, and it will be putting a new lineup together again. But yeah, it's the same problem as always. It's trying to get 5, 6, 7 people in one place, get them across the country to a rehearsal schedule for a gig when everybody plays in 2 or 3 different bands. So yeah, it's tricky.
In a haze of Yes. And he said, I'm the owner. Get your things out of here. Says, I'm sorry. This is my garden. You'll have to deal with my solicitor. And the man who was with him said, you won't need a solicitor, you'll need a doctor.
Brad Boatwright mastered the album. Mm-hmm. His name comes up a lot on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Why Brad?
He is somebody whose name came up for me the first time. I was getting into Kurt Ballew's sort of recording techniques. He did a lot of home recording, sort of seminar type things. And I'm not really like an engineer or anything, but I do like to know enough to get by. And he was someone that Kurt Ballew had recommended to people originally. And again, like you, I saw his name on a bunch of records that I liked. And I think this is the third album he's mastered for us now. And I'm just always super happy with the results. He has a very sort of warm and natural style. He doesn't overcook things. They're never too loud, never squash. He just gets the most out of the material. So it's just a pleasure to keep working with him, really. I'm just a big fan of his work.
Now, was there anything that he worked on in the past that you felt was a good fit for what you're trying to do with Dawnwalker?
Not specifically. Not specific records that he'd mastered. He just came highly recommended by everybody that had worked with him. And I know Joe has worked with him a bunch of times as well. And every time I think about going somewhere else, I sort of think it's not going to be as good as Brad, so I just keep going back.
If it's not broke, right?
Exactly.
So, if I'm not mistaken, this album will be self-released. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, was this a choice? Do you choose to be an independent band?
Yes and no. Like, we kind of don't have people beating our doors down or anything like that. We have had a few conversations with people, but they either seemed somewhat devious and not on the up and up, or they were sort of boutique bedroom labels that we sort of feel like that's kind of what we're doing ourselves anyway. And even though it would be nice to work with some different people, I'm quite happy to do it myself. I enjoy the process of it. So it just makes most sense for us, I think, right now. Especially just with the nature of, I don't know if I have a band next week or not. Like, we can't just go on tour in a month's time or something because we probably don't exist and everybody will be booked on some other thing. So I don't know, it's just nice to be masters of our own destiny and also slightly wary of the whole label system, to be honest. So it's a bit of one and a bit of the other.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of a label is at this point in time. It seems like a lot of promotion, and I mean, certainly on the manufacturing side, to have somebody who has the capital to invest in physical releases is good. Mm-hmm. Or, the contacts within, getting the music out to journalists or radio stations or whatever. Mm-hmm. It takes time to build up those resources. And so if you're working with somebody who's been doing that for 10, 20 years, and that's a leg up. But beyond that, I feel like DIY is the way to go, especially within independent music.
Yeah, and it's sort of like we've only really been getting interest for the last 2 or 3 years, and I feel like things have got significantly worse in that short period of time where the bands are putting up all the money to make their albums, and like they're putting in all the graft, putting in all the money up front, and then a label just kind of swoops in to take their profits, and it doesn't really seem fair to me. But to put a more positive spin on it, there's guys like, I'm a big fan of Phil Elverum, you know, Mount Eerie and the microphones, and the way that he runs it by himself. He does all his own artwork, prints his own records, sends out these beautiful packages. I think it's like really inspiring, and that's kind of something I'd like to get better at, is the presentation on a small scale.
Now, as somebody who's handling that aspect of the releases and the promotion and things like that, is that something you're interested in doing for other bands? Like, would you form your own boutique label and release other people's music?
No, probably not. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of emails and admin and all that, and I think if I wasn't doing it for something that I was really personally invested in, that would probably take the fun out of it, and it could be quite grueling. Which isn't to say that there isn't somebody else's record that I could be that invested in. I could imagine doing it for friends in a small sort of DIY sort of way, but no, I have no real aspirations to start a label.
And beyond label aspirations, what's next for Dawnwalker?
It's an interesting question. I hadn't really stopped to think about it until the album was done, which was only fairly recently because of various reasons, the delays in getting vinyl printed and all these things. It's only kind of feels very recently that it's finally been done. And so now I'm turning to think what's next, and I don't really know what the answer is at the minute. After every album, I sort of feel like it might be the last one, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have some other ideas I'd like to explore which don't feel like Dawnwalker ideas. They might need a new moniker, or it might be a side project, or it might come full circle and turn into a Dawnwalker thing, but I don't know. It's a good question right now. It's something that's on my mind a lot.
Watch the space.
Exactly.
So by the time people hear this interview, House of Sand will be out.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, how can people order the album? What's the best way to get it?
The best, and in fact the only way to get it, is through our Bandcamp, dawnwalker.bandcamp.com, exclusive.
Do you want to say anything about the physical releases that you have for this?
We're just doing vinyl this time round. We get a lot of messages from people asking us when the CDs are coming out, but it just doesn't seem like there's enough demand for it right now. So I would like to put CDs out for the guys that still love them, but it just doesn't seem like quite enough demand. So for now, we're just doing vinyl and digital, and if any other opportunities come along, then we will certainly consider CDs, but vinyl is king for me. For me, it's the most important thing to release.
And is there more than one version of the vinyl?
Nope, just one straight down the line, black classic.
Cool. And if people want to follow Dawnwalker online, what's the best way to do that?
You can find us on all the usual social media pages. We have our own website, which is dawnwalker.uk, and then Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we are Dawnwalker UK.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, not really. I hope people like the album. It's very different to the last one, and it might take a little bit of getting used to, but I hope that people will give it time and it will make sense at some point down the line. I hope.
Cool. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Adrian. It's been a pleasure.